There are moments in life when fear surrounds us, when the unseen feels more real than the visible. In those moments, when the heart is weary and the spirit is under siege, a powerful truth remains unshaken: heaven is not silent, and leading the charge on its behalf is Archangel Michael. Michael is not a myth or a poetic image of good triumphing over evil. He is a real and active force in the spiritual realm, the one who stands at the front of heaven's army. His name means, "Who is like God," a name that is both a question and a challenge to every force that opposes the divine. He appears in Scripture not as a gentle figure, but as a warrior. In the book of Daniel, he is called the Great Prince who protects the people of God. In Revelation, he is seen casting down the great dragon, defeating darkness with commanding force. Michael is not sent where things are calm. He is sent into battle. His presence is not limited to ancient texts. Across centuries and through countless testimonies, believers have spoken of his intervention in moments of danger and despair. He arrives where hope is threatened, where truth is under attack, and where the faithful cry out for help. Michael is not a passive figure. He is the strength of heaven in motion. He stands when others fall. He leads when fear tries to silence. And he defends with a power not born of earth, but of eternal authority. To understand who Michael is, one must recognize the nature of the fight. The battles he engages are not of flesh and blood, but of spirit and truth. And in those invisible wars, against fear, doubt, temptation, he is never far from those who seek refuge in God. Heaven does not abandon its people, and Michael, as its commander, is proof of that promise. His sword is not just a weapon, it is a message that evil will not have the final word. That light will rise again. That justice is not silent. Those who walk in faith do not walk alone. Michael walks with them. He is not worshipped, but he is revered as the appointed defender of all that is sacred. When darkness comes close, he stands between. When the soul trembles, he brings the strength of heaven itself. The raw power of Archangel Michael is not distant. It is near, it is fierce, it is ready. And for those who stand in the truth, it is already at work. Long before the foundations of the earth were laid, before time stretched its fingers across the fabric of creation, there existed a realm of radiant order, of harmony untouched by sin or decay. It was within this realm, in the courts of heaven, that Michael came into being, not by birth as men know it, but by divine craftsmanship. He was not formed out of dust or breath, but summoned into existence by the will of the Almighty, perfect and complete, not as a mortal servant, but as a heavenly warrior. His creation was not an accident, nor was it a result of divine necessity. It was a deliberate act of holy intent. Michael was fashioned to fulfill a role unlike any other in the celestial hierarchy, to stand guard at the gates of heaven, to defend what is sacred, and to uphold the law of the Most High with both strength and purity. In the divine structure of heavenly beings, Michael holds the title of Archangel, which does not merely signify rank, but speaks of a calling that echoes with authority and charge. The book of Jude, in verse 9, refers to him directly as the Archangel Michael, a singular title that separates him from other angelic beings. He is not simply one among many, but a chosen one, marked from his origin to carry a mission rooted in divine warfare. Unlike other angels who deliver messages or guide the faithful, Michael is called to confront darkness head-on. His very being resonates with purpose, with clarity of role, untouched by confusion or deviation. His name alone reflects his identity, not who he is in himself, but whom he serves and reflects, who is like God. The phrase is not just a label, but a sword in itself, cutting through pride and rebellion with the truth of divine supremacy. His appointment as heaven's defender was not an afterthought. From the beginning, he was designated to protect the sacred order, to stand in defiance against any spirit that sought to twist, corrupt, or challenge the sovereignty of God. This appointment is captured vividly in the book of Revelation, where in chapter 12, verse 7 it is written, "And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon." This verse, though often read as a scene of conflict, is also a declaration of hierarchy. Michael leads not as a volunteer, but as the appointed general of heavenly forces. He carries the authority to command, not by ambition, but by ordination. The prophet Daniel offers another glimpse into the singularity of Michael's role. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 13, Michael is described as one of the chief princes who came to the aid of a heavenly messenger delayed by opposition in the spiritual realm. Again, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, he is called the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people. These verses are not ornamental details. They are signposts to his identity. Michael is the one sent when resistance is fierce. He is the one who stands when others cannot break through. In both scenes, he is portrayed not only as powerful, but as faithful, ready to rise on behalf of those who walk in covenant with God. What sets Michael apart is not merely his might, but the nature of his heart. He is described in various traditions as loyal beyond question, obedient without hesitation, and humble despite his immense authority. He does not exalt himself, he exalts the name of God. He does not seek glory, but gladly reflects the glory of the one who sent him. His strength is not for domination, but for service. His power is not self-sourced, but drawn from the throne of heaven. This is why he is trusted to command, not because he is flawless in the way men imagine perfection, but because his will is fully aligned with the will of the Creator. He was created for battle, yes, but battle with purpose. Not for destruction's sake, but for preservation, not to wage endless war, but to uphold eternal peace. Every act of Michael is shaped by holiness. Every movement reflects divine intention. His purpose is not reactive, but proactive. He does not merely respond to evil, he is positioned to prevent its dominion. There is something inherently sacred in the way Michael stands guard. He is like a wall, built from light, unyielding, immovable, forged not in rage but in righteousness. Even in the unseen places of the spiritual realm, where human eyes cannot follow and earthly understanding falls short, Michael moves with precision. He is not swayed by emotion, nor distracted by doubt. His loyalty is total. He is a guardian, not just of heaven's gates, but of heaven's integrity. In a universe created in perfect order, where every star was hung with care and every law established in wisdom, Michael is the enforcer of that order. His very presence is a warning to chaos. It cannot enter, it will not prevail. And though his origin is ancient beyond comprehension, Michael is not bound by the past. His appointment is ongoing. He is not retired from his post. He is not a figure of memory, but a reality of the present. The same Michael who stood in eternity's dawn stands still today. His calling has not dimmed, his assignment has not changed. He remains the defender, not only of heaven, but of all that heaven defends. The first war ever waged did not begin on earth, nor did it arise from human hands. It erupted in heaven, in the realm of unfiltered light, where obedience once reigned supreme. What began as a swelling of pride in one created being ignited the most violent upheaval the spiritual realm had ever witnessed. This was no dispute of opinion, no clash of misunderstanding. It was a calculated uprising, an attempt to seize what was never meant to be taken. Lucifer, once among the most adorned, allowed his beauty to harden into arrogance and his role into ambition. He no longer wished to reflect glory, he sought to possess it. Heaven does not tremble easily, but when rebellion took root within its own ranks, the very foundations of loyalty were put to the test. Lucifer did not act alone. With persuasive speech and the allure of promised greatness, he drew to himself a host of angels, beings created for worship, who now turned toward revolt. The heavenly harmony fractured. Order gave way to resistance. What followed was not metaphor or myth, it was war. In that moment of cosmic crisis, it was Michael who arose, not as a witness, not as a mediator, but as the commander of the armies of heaven. He did not hesitate or deliberate. There was no counsel of compromise. The presence of evil demanded a response, and that response came not from the throne directly, but through the one charged to defend it. Michael stepped forward, not with sentiment, but with resolve. He did not speak to persuade Lucifer back into obedience. He stood to cast him down. The battle that followed was fierce beyond imagination. This was not a conflict of equal forces. It was a collision between corruption and purity, between a created being swollen with pride and a servant empowered by the authority of God. Revelation chapter 12 verse 7 describes it with piercing simplicity. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. It was a clash of absolutes. No gray space remained. There was loyalty and there was treason, and Michael made it clear where the line had been drawn. Unlike the wars of men, there were no cries for negotiation, no truces offered. Heaven does not compromise with rebellion. The power Michael wielded was not his own invention, but a channeling of divine force through perfect submission. His strategy was not cunning, but direct. His command was not dependent on numbers, but on alignment with divine law. Lucifer came with fury and manipulation. Michael came with authority. One sought a throne, the other stood for the one who already sat upon it. As the armies collided, the battle did not unfold in confusion, but in clarity. The hosts of heaven, under Michael's leadership, moved in perfect coordination. They fought not for conquest, but to purge the very presence of rebellion from the sacred domain. Every clash of power, every spiritual blow, was an assertion that holiness cannot coexist with defiance. Michael's leadership was not driven by vengeance or emotion. It was grounded in divine order. His role was not only to confront, but to expel. Lucifer's downfall was inevitable. His strength, drawn from pride and deceit, could not hold against the purity of heaven's might. The higher he had exalted himself in his own mind, the farther he fell when truth struck. The moment Michael moved in divine judgment, Lucifer's illusion of power collapsed. He who sought to rise above the stars of God found himself hurled down to the realm of separation, stripped of his former light, cast from the presence he once stood before. This act was not a banishment driven by wrath. It was a cleansing act, a reassertion that rebellion has no place in heaven. Michael did not act independently. He enforced the verdict of divine holiness. What Lucifer had corrupted through persuasion and pride, Michael dismantled through faithfulness and force. The dragon was not wounded. He was cast out. There was no recovery, no return, and those who followed him shared his fate. Michael's power in that moment was not measured by the destruction he caused, but by the order he restored. He brought no chaos with him. He silenced it. His was not a victory of domination, but of preservation. Through him, the harmony of heaven was not only defended, it was reaffirmed. His sword did not simply destroy, it separated light from darkness, allegiance from defection, truth from falsehood. The fall of Lucifer was not just a punishment, it was a necessary consequence, one that echoes through every realm, reminding all who serve in the kingdom of God that no beauty, no power, no position can substitute for obedience. And it is Michael who remains the clearest sign of that truth. He is the proof that loyalty is stronger than ambition, that humility can command more authority than pride ever could, and that heaven, when challenged, does not falter. It responds. This celestial battle was not the end of Michael's warfare, but it was the defining moment that established him as the uncompromising general of the Lord's armies. He did not rise to glory through ambition. He stood in glory because he never left his post. While others were seduced by power, he remained rooted in purpose. While the throne was challenged, he protected it, not with argument, but with action. And in doing so, he etched his name into the history of heaven as the one who would not bow to darkness, no matter how radiant its disguise. In every generation, the world has witnessed the invisible currents of spiritual struggle pressing against the lives of the faithful. Though the battlefields are no longer the blazing heavens of Revelation or the cosmic halls where Michael once cast down Lucifer, the war has not ended, it has simply shifted ground. Today, the clash continues, not in fiery visions above, but in the quiet chambers of the human heart, in homes rocked by despair, in minds burdened by fear, in souls torn between truth and deception. And though the enemy adapts, the commander of heaven's army has not retreated into silence. Michael still moves. He does not appear for spectacle. He does not manifest to entertain or to satisfy curiosity. When Michael comes, it is because war has arrived. Not war in the flesh, but spiritual war that rages beneath the surface of life. These are not symbolic ideas crafted by poetic minds. These are the lived realities of countless believers who, through prayer, through desperate cries in the night, have encountered the unmistakable presence of a guardian they did not summon lightly. Stories have emerged from every corner of the globe, in prisons and hospitals, on battlefields and in bedrooms, in places abandoned by hope. People have spoken of visions, dreams, and interventions that defy natural explanation. In these moments, when danger seems to press against the soul with unrelenting force, Michael has been seen, not as a glowing statue or a distant figure, but as a presence that arrests the advance of darkness. There are testimonies of those who, surrounded by spiritual oppression, cried out not merely for help, but for divine defense. And what answered them was not emptiness, but power. A sudden peace, a shield where there was once fear, an unexplainable escape from destruction. These moments are not isolated. They form a pattern, a witness to the truth that Michael remains on assignment. Scripture makes room for this ongoing mission. Psalm 34 verse 7 declares, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them." Though Michael is not named here, the truth of angelic guardianship is affirmed. And those who walk in reverence, in obedience, and in the fear of God are not left vulnerable. They are surrounded, not merely by ideas, but by real commissioned protectors. And among these, Michael stands as chief. He does not respond to casual curiosity. He responds to sincere faith. There is something about the heart that cries out for justice, for purity, for truth, that draws heaven's attention. When a believer resists temptation, when they refuse to bow to falsehood, when they pray not for comfort but for courage, that is when the battle intensifies. And it is in these very moments that Michael is known to intervene. Not always with visions or miracles, but often with strength, a strength that is not one's own, a boldness to speak truth, a clarity of mind in confusion, a sudden lifting of fear that felt immovable just moments before. These are signs not of natural recovery, but of supernatural assistance. Calling upon Michael is not a formula, nor is it a ritual to be repeated without understanding. It is a prayer of alignment, a cry for God's warrior to act not on the basis of personal demand, but on the authority of divine promise. The faithful are not left defenseless. They are given the means to stand. And one of those means is the help of the Archangel, who does not ignore the cries of the righteous. Those who pray with sincerity, who invoke Michael not as a relic but as a living protector, often find that they are not standing alone. There are prayers passed down through the centuries, shaped by faith and tradition, that call upon Michael's intercession. They do not elevate him above God, but honor the role given to him by the Creator. These prayers, when spoken from a heart anchored in truth, become a declaration of trust, not in Michael's power alone, but in the God who appointed him. And those who walk in righteousness, who pursue purity, who choose the narrow path despite the cost, are the ones he is drawn to defend. It is not about perfection, it is about position. Michael fights for those who stand in the light. He responds to faithfulness, not to spectacle. His mission remains clear: to protect, to defend, to war on behalf of those aligned with the will of heaven. And in a world where the spiritual battle is often disguised beneath distractions, compromise, and quiet despair, his presence is not a myth to be admired, but a reality to be received. In the silence after the prayer, in the moment after the tear falls, when everything around still seems dark, but something within begins to stir with unexpected strength, this is often where Michael has passed through. Not seen, not always felt, but absolutely active. He does not come for applause, he comes for war, and when he is near, the darkness shifts. The believer does not walk this path unprotected. The armor of God is not a metaphor alone, and neither are the ones sent to enforce it. Michael is not a memory, he is a force, and to those who walk in faith, his sword still guards the way. The image of Archangel Michael often burns itself into the imagination as one of fierce majesty, a figure adorned in heavenly armor, radiating light, with a sword raised high against the forces of darkness. But this image is not mere symbolism. It is a reflection of deeper realities that speak to the nature of spiritual warfare and the tools appointed by heaven for its execution. The weapons Michael wields are not forged in earthly fire, nor tempered by human hands. They are holy instruments saturated with meaning, commissioned not only for battle, but for the preservation of all that is sacred. At the center of Michael's arsenal stands the sword, a weapon that has transcended time as a symbol of authority and justice. Yet Michael's sword is not a blade of metal. It is a weapon whose edges are shaped by truth and whose power lies in righteousness. When Scripture speaks of the sword of the Spirit in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17, it is described as the Word of God. This is no coincidence, for Michael, as commander of the heavenly host, does not strike according to personal desire. He strikes in accordance with the word that stands eternal. His sword does not pierce flesh, but falsehood. It does not shed blood, but exposes deception. Every movement of that blade is an act of judgment, not cruelty. It is not wielded in anger, but in absolute obedience to divine justice. To understand Michael's sword is to understand its origin. It flows from the very mouth of God, just as the sword in Revelation chapter 19, verse 15, proceeds from the mouth of the Messiah to strike down the nations. This sword is the embodiment of divine speech, sharp and unerring, cutting through illusion with the clarity of eternal law. Michael wields this sword not simply because he is strong, but because he has been entrusted with its purpose. His strength is not the source of the sword's power. The sword's power is the source of his strength in battle. But the sword is only the beginning. Michael's armor, though not described in detail as a physical object, reflects the principles found in Ephesians chapter 6, where the Apostle Paul exhorts believers to put on the full armor of God. Each piece of armor listed is not a relic, but a virtue. The belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the readiness of the gospel of peace, all these are not merely for men and women walking the earth, but have their counterparts in the angelic realm. Michael embodies these realities perfectly. He wears no armor of corruption, no covering of compromise. His entire being radiates truth because he serves the truth. His movements reflect righteousness because unrighteousness cannot stand in his presence. The shield he carries is not a device to deflect arrows, but a manifestation of holy protection. It repels every accusation, every spiritual weapon formed against the people of God. Michael's defense is not passive, it is aggressive in its resistance to evil. When he raises his shield, it is as though heaven itself has drawn a line saying, "This far and no further." Evil may advance, but it cannot pass where Michael has been assigned. And the faithful, when clothed in their own spiritual armor, are drawn under the covering of this divine defense. There is also the unseen weapon that flows through everything Michael does, the authority of heaven. Authority is not always loud, it is not always dramatic, but it is absolute. Michael carries the authority to cast out, to confront, to command. When he speaks, it is not his voice that moves the enemy, but the power behind the voice. His authority comes not from himself, but from the throne he serves. And because that throne is unshakable, so too is the force of his command. This is why demonic powers do not stand and reason with him. They flee, not out of superstition, but out of recognition. They know what he carries. They know who he represents. Every weapon Michael carries finds its reflection in the lives of those who walk in faith. The sword of the word is not reserved for angels. It is offered to every believer who dares to speak truth in a world clouded by lies. The shield of faith is not a heavenly ornament, but a daily necessity for those who press on through adversity. The breastplate of righteousness is not a reward for perfection, but a gift to those who pursue holiness with sincerity. When Michael moves in battle, he does not act alone. He moves in alignment with every spiritual truth that has been made available to the faithful. His weapons are not beyond reach. They are symbols of what has been given to all who stand under the banner of the Most High. Yet it must be remembered, these weapons are not toys for the curious or symbols to be admired. They are tools of war. They carry weight, responsibility, and consequence. To take up truth is to confront falsehood. To wear righteousness is to invite attack from a world that resists purity. To carry faith is to stand in defiance of fear. And in all of this, Michael serves as both example and ally. He fights not just beside, but in tandem with those who fight well. To understand his weapons is to understand the very nature of spiritual conflict. It is not about loud displays or visible strength. It is about standing firm in what is true, what is just, what is holy. Michael does not flinch, he does not hesitate, because his weapons are not temporary, they are eternal. Forged in the wisdom of God, shaped by the character of heaven, and sharpened by the purpose for which he was created, those who walk in the Spirit are not left defenseless. They are invited into the same armory, the same truth, the same righteousness, the same shield and sword. And though Michael remains heaven's appointed commander, his weapons echo in the hands of all who stand for what is pure. He is not only a warrior to be admired, he is a pattern to be followed. Throughout history, the rise and fall of empires have often been interpreted through the lens of politics, economics, or the strength of armies. Yet behind the shifting borders and coronations of kings lies another narrative, one invisible to human perception, but deeply real to those who understand the unseen. In this divine history, Michael is not merely a warrior of individual battles. He is a heavenly strategist appointed over nations, a commander who does not merely respond to events, but helps shape them in accordance with the sovereign will of God. The movement of nations, the preservation of a people, the enforcement of prophetic timelines, all fall under his celestial jurisdiction when ordered by the throne he serves. The Book of Daniel offers rare and penetrating insight into this dimension of Michael's authority. In chapter 10, verse 21, the angel speaking to Daniel refers to Michael as your prince, a designation that goes beyond simple protection. It implies rulership, oversight, and responsibility over a people. Michael does not function as an isolated spiritual entity. He is tied to the fate of Israel in a manner that underscores divine intentionality in the preservation of God God's covenant and purpose through that nation. The angelic messenger reveals that Michael had to assist in a spiritual confrontation with the Prince of Persia, implying that earthly nations have spiritual counterparts, entities which either oppose or align with divine order. And when resistance in the heavenly realm becomes too fierce, it is Michael who intervenes. He is not called for minor skirmishes. He is summoned when the movement of history itself hangs in the balance. Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 expands this image even further. Here, Michael is again presented as the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people. But this time, his role is linked not only to protection, but to prophetic events. He arises during a time of distress, such as never occurred since there was a nation. His appearance marks the activation of divine intervention on a scale that transcends personal deliverance. It signals cosmic shift. Michael stands not merely to comfort the faithful, but to execute judgment, to bring about deliverance when the pressure of history and prophecy converge. Throughout the centuries, Israel has been a nation marked by survival against impossible odds. Its endurance despite exile, persecution, and dispersion is more than a testimony of resilience. It is a sign of divine preservation. And though many forces have worked visibly for its destruction, there is reason to believe that forces have also operated invisibly for its defense. The scriptures do not exhaustively document every battle Michael has fought, but they reveal enough to make one truth clear. When God assigns him to a nation, its fate is protected until its prophetic purpose is fulfilled. Michael's role, however, does not end with Israel. While his allegiance is closely tied to the covenant people, his reach extends wherever the purposes of God must be defended at a geopolitical level. History bears witness to moments where events have turned not because of the brilliance of generals or the numbers of armies, but because something beyond human control intervened. In moments of impending annihilation, inexplicable shifts have occurred. Armies halted, empires crumbled, and tyrants fell. While the records of men may not always recognize it, the spiritual realm is never silent during the critical junctures of world history. It is in these moments that Michael's presence can be discerned, not through visible signs, but through outcomes that defy logic and fulfill divine timelines. He does not interfere arbitrarily. He does not act on personal initiative. He is dispatched in alignment with heavenly decrees. His movements correspond to events prophesied long before they unfolded. He upholds what has been written. He protects what must come to pass. His loyalty is not to nations themselves, but to God's plan through them. Nations rise and fall, but it is the orchestration of divine intent that Michael defends. He does not pledge allegiance to political boundaries, but to eternal promises, and wherever those promises are threatened, he stands. This reality should not be misunderstood as mere allegory. Scripture makes it evident that the spiritual realm does not simply observe history, it participates in it. The presence of Michael in these grand movements confirms that God is not a distant observer of global affairs. He is intimately involved, appointing agents like Michael to guard what has been foretold and to strike against forces that would derail the path of redemption. The invisible war that takes place across nations is not just a matter of angels and demons battling in abstraction. It is a structured campaign led by commanders like Michael, designed to ensure that God's purposes unfold without hindrance. To speak of Michael's role in global events is to acknowledge that the heavens are not passive. They are engaged, deliberate, and deeply invested in the course of human history. Every throne that rises, every nation that collapses, every boundary redrawn by war or peace is seen through the eyes of eternity. And Michael, as one of its highest agents, walks the corridors of empires with sword drawn, not to rule but to protect what has been written. Across the long and winding journey of Christian history, from the candle-lit catacombs of early believers to the great cathedrals echoing with choral hymns, one figure has consistently stood in silent strength among the faithful: Michael. Though heaven is his dwelling and warfare his charge, his presence has never remained confined to celestial heights. Through visions, apparitions, and centuries of devotion, he has made himself known to the Church not only as a defender in invisible battles, but as a tangible sign of divine nearness, healing, and unity. His story, intertwined with the faith of generations, reveals a presence that does not retreat from the human story, but walks with it, always ready, always near. The earliest Christians lived in a world of uncertainty and persecution, often meeting in secret and worshipping under threat of death. Yet even in those fragile beginnings, Michael's name found its place among their prayers and invocations. As the Church grew, so did awareness of angelic reality, not as an abstract theology, but as a lived experience. Michael was not only remembered as the one who cast down the serpent in Revelation, he became, in the hearts of many, the one who still watches over the Church in times of trial. In places where the faithful cried out for protection, healing, and deliverance, testimonies began to rise, accounts of visions, sudden aid, and unseen interventions that bore his mark. Among the most enduring of these is the event at Monte Gargano in southern Italy. In the late 5th century, a mysterious series of occurrences began to draw attention to a cave in the mountains, where, according to tradition, Michael himself appeared. What began as a local mystery soon unfolded into a sacred encounter. The bishop of the nearby town, after fasting and praying for guidance, was said to have received a visitation in which Michael declared the cave to be under his protection and a place of divine grace. The site, now known as the Sanctuary of Monte Sant'Angelo, has remained a place of pilgrimage for centuries. Those who walk its stony paths do not merely seek relics. They come searching for the one who once drew his sword on heaven's battleground and who now offers healing and guidance to the Church on earth. Far to the northwest, on a rocky tidal island off the coast of Normandy, another sacred monument arose, Mont Saint-Michel. Here too, the story tells of an appearance by the Archangel, this time to the Bishop of Avranches in the 8th century. Michael instructed him to build a church upon the mount, an act which would eventually give rise to one of the most iconic and enduring Christian landmarks in the world. But the significance of Mont Saint-Michel is not merely architectural. It stands as a spiritual symbol of heaven, meeting earth, of Michael's towering presence over the sea of time and tide. Pilgrims through the ages have seen in its towering walls and isolated cliffs a reflection of Michael himself, steadfast, unmoved, an unyielding sentinel amidst the waves. Yet Michael's closeness to the faithful has not been limited to grand apparitions or ancient shrines. His image has been carved into altars, painted into ceilings, stitched into vestments, and invoked in liturgies for centuries. From Eastern Orthodox icons to Latin prayers, from Coptic hymns to Celtic folklore, the figure of Michael persists, not as a myth, but as a companion of the Church. Countless believers throughout the ages have experienced his intervention, not always visibly, but unmistakably. There have been moments in darkened hospital rooms, in persecuted villages, in war-torn lands, where people have reported deliverance that can only be explained by supernatural means. In many of these accounts, the name of Michael appears not as an afterthought, but as the one who came when no one else could. He is not only remembered for his sword, he is also revered for his mercy. The Church, in its liturgical calendar, commemorates him not with fanfare, but with reverence. The Feast of the Archangels, celebrated each year, invites the faithful to reflect not only on celestial warfare, but on divine companionship. Michael is not distant. He is accessible through prayer, especially in moments of danger and vulnerability. Even the sacraments, while centered on Christ, are surrounded by the mystery of heavenly participation. The ancient prayers of exorcism, for example, call explicitly upon Michael's help, recognizing his unique authority to confront darkness not only in the past but in the present. Michael's relationship with the faithful is not one of hierarchy but of service. He does not demand worship. He draws the church toward deeper awe of the one who sent him. And in this, he becomes not just a warrior, but a sign, a living reminder that the divine remains involved in earthly life. His healing is not a substitute for God's hand, but an extension of it. His presence is not a distraction from Christ, but a reinforcement of the truth that Christ's kingdom is defended, protected, and surrounded by those appointed for such a task. From ancient basilicas to quiet modern chapels, from the grand to the hidden, his shadow still lingers. Not to dominate, but to guard. Not to exalt himself, but to remind the church that she is never alone. There are moments in life when something shifts, not externally but deep within the soul. In times of great pressure, when fear closes in and confusion clouds the way forward, there often comes an interruption that cannot be explained by reason or emotion. It may arrive as a sudden calm in the middle of panic, as an unshakable clarity when all seemed lost, or as a quiet strength that pushes back against overwhelming despair. These moments, though subtle, carry the fingerprints of something greater, and in many of them the presence of Michael is not just symbolic, it is real. Michael is not sent without purpose. He does not descend casually into human affairs. His interventions are strategic, ordered, and often occur when the spiritual conflict reaches a point where the soul is under siege. His arrival is not to bring attention to himself, but to shift the balance in favor of righteousness. Those who have walked through the fire of spiritual oppression, through physical danger, or through emotional turmoil, often look back and realize there was a moment, unexplainable, yet undeniable, when something changed. The danger passed, the darkness lifted, the torment ended. These are the signs that Michael has moved. One of the clearest indicators of his presence is the sudden escape from circumstances that defy logic or possibility. Countless testimonies speak of believers who should have perished in car crashes, fires, or acts of violence, but somehow emerged untouched. In some of these accounts, witnesses describe a figure, radiant, unmoved by natural law, standing between them and the threat. Others speak of a voice that warned them just in time, or an invisible barrier that seemed to halt danger mid-strike. While not every act of protection is accompanied by vision or voice, the outcome often bears the unmistakable mark of angelic intervention. Michael is not always seen, but when he acts, the shift in atmosphere is immediate. Dreams, too, have served as a channel for his manifestation. While dreams can be shaped by the mind, there are moments when the dream transcends emotion and memory, entering the territory of spiritual encounter. People from various backgrounds and cultures have described seeing a warrior clothed in light, bearing a sword of fire, standing guard at the edge of conflict or driving back dark, oppressive forces with undeniable force. These dreams often leave the dreamer with more than fear or curiosity. They leave them with peace, with clarity, with a renewed sense of courage that lingers long after waking. Michael's presence in such visions is not random. It is a response to a cry from the soul, a divine acknowledgement that heaven has heard and has sent help. In the realm of prayer, his presence is often recognized not by vision, but by effect. During intercession, especially in moments where spiritual warfare is intense, there is sometimes a turning point, a moment when heaviness lifts, when words no longer feel resisted, and when the flow of prayer moves with unexpected power and authority. This is often the moment Michael has arrived on the scene. He does not need to announce himself. He manifests through outcome. when resistance breaks, when demonic influence dissipates, when the tide of oppression turns back without a clear human cause, his sword has likely passed through the battlefield. Peace amidst chaos is another sign that should never be underestimated. Michael does not only bring protection from harm, he brings the atmosphere of heaven into places where it has been pushed out. When a person feels surrounded by confusion, fear, and uncertainty, but then encounters a supernatural stillness that settles like a blanket over their soul, that peace is not imagined. It is placed. Michael fights not only to remove darkness, but to establish the conditions where the presence of God can rest. His intervention is not merely about crisis management, it is about restoration of spiritual order, and that order often expresses itself through deep, undeniable calm. The faithful may also sense his nearness in moments of decision, times when truth must be spoken, when courage must be chosen, when evil stands face to face with those who carry the light. Michael does not always fight in distant realms. He stands beside believers when they refuse to compromise, when they speak what is right in hostile environments, when they walk into dangerous places carrying nothing but their faith. It is important to remember that the signs of his intervention are rarely theatrical. He does not perform to impress or to entertain. His arrival is not always wrapped in spectacle. More often, it is shrouded in mystery, wrapped in silence, hidden in outcomes rather than displays. But for those who have eyes to see and hearts attuned to the spiritual, the traces are clear. Deliverance leaves marks, protection has fingerprints, and victory, even when quiet, carries the scent of divine command. What matters most is not whether one sees him, but whether one recognizes what has happened in his wake. The soul once tormented now rests. The fear once paralyzing now fades. The enemy once advancing now retreats. In these moments heaven has acted, and Michael, ever faithful to his charge, has done what he was created to do. Not for his own sake, but for the sake of those walking in the truth. Understanding these signs is not about pursuing mystical experiences. It is about discerning the active presence of God's order in the midst of life's chaos. It is about knowing that help still comes, that battles are still fought on behalf of the righteous, and that the warrior who once cast down the dragon still marches forward, still takes assignments, still defends those who refuse to surrender to darkness. To walk with Michael is not to worship him, nor to place him above the one who made him. It is to recognize the sacred partnership between heaven and the faithful, where divine power meets human obedience and spiritual protection is drawn close through alignment with truth. Michael walks not with those who are flawless, but with those who are faithful. His presence surrounds those who pursue righteousness, those who love justice, those who live not by fear, but by conviction rooted in the Word of God. He is drawn not to pride, but to humility. He does not respond to control, but to surrender. The Scriptures offer a pathway not only to calling upon God, but to receiving the help of His messengers. Psalm 91 provides a foundation for this relationship. It declares that those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. In verse 11 it continues, "For He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." This promise is not abstract. It is activated when a life is positioned in God's covering, when choices, habits, and heart are directed toward what is holy. Michael is one of those angels commanded to act, and his intervention follows the presence of submission. To walk in light is to walk with protection. To live in obedience is to draw heaven's warriors near. There are prayers that have endured throughout Christian tradition, written not to elevate angels, but to humbly request the aid God has promised through them. One of the most well-known is the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, which pleads, "Defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil." This prayer does not presume power over darkness. It acknowledges need. It invites participation from the one who was created to confront what we cannot always see or fight alone. And when offered from a place of sincerity and trust, this kind of prayer can stir divine motion. Yet prayer alone is not enough if the heart remains distant. To truly walk with Michael is to walk in a posture that reflects his own. Submission to divine authority, loyalty without compromise, courage without self-promotion. Michael does not act according to whim. He moves when the will of God is present, and when the lives of those under his protection reflect the values of the kingdom. A life lived in truth is a life guarded in power. A person who stands for righteousness will never stand unaccompanied. Walking with Michael also means embracing the armor of God, not as a metaphor, but as a daily choice. Ephesians chapter 6 outlines this clearly. The belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, and the shoes of peace. Each piece is a reflection of the weapons Michael wields. Each one forms a bridge between the human and the heavenly. When a believer puts on these virtues through prayer, through action, and through faith, they enter the battlefield not as victims, but as soldiers. And in that space, Michael does not look on from a distance. He joins the ranks. Humility, obedience, and boldness are more than attitudes. They are spiritual magnets. They draw heaven's protection because they align with heaven's order. Michael is not sent to accompany those who flirt with darkness. He is assigned to those who resist it. And the more a person walks in agreement with the values of God's kingdom, the more they will find themselves surrounded by the assistance of heaven's commander. In moments of fear, a believer may call upon Michael. In seasons of attack, they may pray for his defense. In times of spiritual uncertainty, they may ask for his guidance. But to truly walk with him is to live a life that invites his presence even before the battle begins. It is to walk in holiness, to pursue peace, to stand in truth, not just as a way of life, but as an act of partnership with the kingdom of light. The call is not to fascination, but to faith. Not to seek angels for their own sake, but to understand that heaven still moves with purpose. And for those who walk in that purpose, Michael is not a distant figure of ancient texts. He is a present ally in the journey toward the eternal. If this message has stirred something in your heart, if you have felt the call to walk with courage, to pray with conviction, and to trust that heaven still moves, then let this be only the beginning. Michael stands ready, and the army of the Lord is never far. To continue receiving messages like this, filled with truth, encouragement, and spiritual strength, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this mission reach more hearts around the world. Click the like button if this message spoke to you, and let your voice be heard by leaving a comment below. Share your thoughts, your prayers, or your own story. Finally, share this video with someone you love. There may be someone close to you who needs to be reminded that they are not alone, that they are defended, and that heaven still fights on their behalf. Thank you for watching, and may you walk forward with peace, strength, and the assurance that Archangel Michael is near.